Hello, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for staying here on the AM show. It's now time for the second part of our big stories, and we are talking politics. I'm sure you may be aware that the NDC's flag bearer aspirant, John Dramani Mahama, went through his vetting process yesterday. And after that, he engaged or spoke to supporters and addressed the press. And he has been saying that at the heart of his campaign is fixing the country's economic situation. He says government has demonstrated that it is incapable of running the affairs, for which reason he's launching another bid to become the NDC's flag bearer in the 2024 election. So that is his central message, if you want to put it that way. Now, the big question is, as party executives go to elect who their flag bearer will be, what should they look out for? Is it simply because, oh, he was former president before? What exactly should we be looking out for? And that conversation is what we are going to be having. And by extension, once they select those people to be their aspirants, what should you and I be looking out for in who the next president of Ghana should be? I've been joined in studio by Dr. Tutu Bwanhi. He's a lecturer, political marketing at the University of Education, Winnipeg. Good morning to you, Doc, and thank you so much for joining us once again. And I've also got Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. He is a CDD fellow, to share their thoughts with us. So let's start off on that big note. So the NDC has been accused over time of giving John Dramani Mahama too much advantage. I remember when they held their national congress here, we had one of the executive members speaking, and the question was, if you have so many people who are aspiring, why does it appear that you're giving John Dramani Mahama an edge over the others? What should the NDC members who are going to be voting for who their flag bearer will be, what should they be looking out for? So far, we've seen Dr. Dufour come up. John Dramani Mahama has put his head out. There's also former Ashanti regional, Ashanti mayor, Kojo Bonsu, and others. What should they be looking out for?
All right. Good morning to viewers. Good morning to you once again. Just one quick correction. I'm a lecturer in marketing.
Okay.
And a consultant in political marketing issues.
Right.
So I think that I always say that, delegates always have responsibilities when it comes to electing candidates, to lead their party, and if possible, to lead Ghana as a nation. And the reasons for saying that is about picking a candidate who has the capabilities, who has vision, who has understanding of the task, before him, to execute it and execute it very well, to the satisfaction of those who voted for him or her. And when, over the years, let me narrow it down to the 1992 dispensation, we realized that voters in general have not done this country justice. And I would also want to state that delegates have also not done this country any good, to the extent that normally the delegates will present candidates that they are comfortable choosing in terms of people who have names within the party, people that, on hindsight, they believe have what it takes, to lead the party without any scientific guidance, to their choices. And so when you look at the way ex-president of blessed memory, Jerry John Rawlings, was elected to lead the NDC, obviously as a founder of the party and as somebody who has been in government, and therefore the delegates believe that let's give him, the leadership mandate for him to lead the party. So he led, and getting to the 2000, the NDC lost the election. And again, coming to MPP in 2000, the delegates also brought Kufuor. Obviously, Kufuor was not somebody who was really known, to the Ghanaian populace, but he got the mandate of the people and came. At a point in time, you realize that it was the election, from that angle, were people with names, right? Then it got to certain degrees that we were electing people at the national level based on, partisan divides. And it is now getting to a situation that people are looking at individuals, and that is where I want to narrow down. All right. Now, if you check, research that has been done, and one particular theory, which has to do with the ticket balancing theory, it outlines certain specific characteristics, about candidates that people should look out for, especially from candidates and from the national voter. And one of such has to do, one, education. Let me put it within certain contexts, demographic variables, right? So we're talking about people's age. And so we saw that in 2012, even 2008, when John Mahama was presented as the vice presidential candidate, the NDC actually positioned him per his age as somebody of the youth category. And therefore, they were pulling the youth to the NDC, and it really worked for them. Again, getting to, 2012, that same brand of the youth came up, which also worked, Another thing has to do with experience. Experience in terms of your knowledge and other experiences within politics.
So if I get you right, the delegates who are going to be choosing these aspirants for us should be looking at how old this person is.
Exactly.
His level of experience.
Exactly.
And what again?
Electability.
Right.
Ability to pull votes, to the party. All right. That is also very significant. Then they talk about the home region advantage, where you are coming from, and your home region. How possible is it that you can equally pool votes? And you realize that that has informed basically certain decisions from MPP and NDC. NDC choosing vice president from central region, because they believe that the vice president elect, would, as it were, be able to pool vote from central region. Okay. And then the MPP also believes in the three northern regions. Apart from that, they look at the religion, all right, which has to do with the Islam religion. And so they combine these two, to also
try and have a balance.
Exactly.
Right. I'll come back to you for more on this, but let me get Dr. Osai Kwapon's initial thoughts on this subject matter. Doc, Dr. Tutubuahin just said that sometimes these delegates do not do us a favor because of the kind of aspirants they choose on behalf of their party. So it's almost as if you're left with no choice but what you're given to choose from. What are your initial thoughts on what should be the most important things delegates should focus on when they go to elect their flag bearers?
Good morning and thank you. I think, ultimately every political party wants to win an election. And so whenever they are going into an election season where they have to choose the flag bearer for a presidential race, that I believe is the foremost thing on their mind. And because they want to win, then they have to start asking themselves, among the candidates who have presented themselves for the flag bearership race, which candidate gives us our best shot at winning the election, at winning the presidency. And so that is when then they start factoring things like who knows the candidate, how well known is the candidate, what sort of experience does the candidate bring to the ticket, what kinds of challenges does the candidate also face in terms of, if they've been in the political arena for a long time, what kind of, history, in terms of his or her politics, credentials, etc., are they bringing to the ticket? And I think that's what delegates would have to factor in to ultimately decide, well, we think if we present candidate A or if we present candidate B, that gives
Please
us
go
our
ahead.
best shot in winning this coming election.
So, as we have it now, we've seen the NDC's John Dramani Mahama talk about what his focus will be. Alan Tremantin has spoken about the Great Transformational Plan, which he has been pushing across the country. For you, do you get that sense that our delegates have reached that point where it is the message and the things that you have outlined that they will focus on? Have we reached that point in our democracy?
I think we have. So the calculation of the delegates the calculus of the delegates may be slightly different because, again, winning is really key for the political party, and therefore, in all of the other factors that will be driven by, the primary one, I believe, would be who gives us our best shot. But once you move from the primary season into the actual national race, then it is now up to the party to say, how do we frame our political message in such a way that we can make a case as to why we should be the party that is elected? Because remember, yes, your partisans, your party people would, quote unquote, always vote for you, or at least most of your own party would vote for you. But to get over that 50% plus one vote line, you would still need some who are in the middle, or even see the extent to which you can plug a few votes from your opponent's camp as well. And for me, that is where the messaging becomes extremely important. Which issues are you going to, highlight? How are you going to frame the conversation in such a way that you can attract the voters that you need to push you over the line? If you look at 2017 Afrobarometer, there was a question about the main reason why you voted for the candidate that you voted for. And the top two reasons were, and it was actually split 42%, but it was the candidate I thought would better manage the affairs of the country. And then the other one was the policies and the message that was proposed by the candidates. And so I think, in as much as our party affiliation drives us to the polls to vote, I also believe that we do factor in some of these other issues in terms of the economic issues and some of the governance issues as well. We saw that clearly in 2016 in terms of how the NPP framed the 2016 election, making it really about the economy and then some other governance issues as well. And you are starting to see signals of that from former President John Mahama. The other day when he launched his campaign platform, he talked about some governance reforms. And so you can see that he's going to do a combination of, the economic challenges and how we can, further get out of the economic challenges that we face. But he's also talked about some, a number of governance issues, strengthening anti-corruption, institutions, making some, moving the constitutional reform process forward, things like that. So I think it's going to be those two things. And the question then becomes the extent to which voters then buy into that message and decide whether they want to give him another mandate or not.
Quickly on this, before I go to Dr. Tutu Buahin, we saw with the NPP during the last elections and the previous ones, they created catchphrases and things that stuck to the people's minds. Now, you talk about John Dramani Mahama's message on the economy, on constitutional reforms. It appears that he's touching on almost everything. You hear Alan Tremantin, he's talking about the Great Transformational Plan. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's too early or it is just right to start that kind of messaging now and be as specific as possible using catchphrases that will trickle down even into the campaign for the general elections? Your quick thoughts on that?
Yes, I don't think it's too early, and I think the earlier you start to court voters, the better it is for you. Because again, things would happen. Some days your message would resonate. Other issues may come up that may dent your message. You would have to sort of keep reinforcing the message. You would have to keep reaching out to different groups, different places. And so I think between, we are already in March, March 2023 is almost over. I don't think it's too early. Yes, it gets to a point where I think voters may experience a little bit of, political fatigue. But at the same time, I think you need enough time to be able to really travel the length and breadth of the country, pushing your message that it's never too early to start.
Dr. Boahen, let me put you on the spot. Let's take the two main political parties because they are the parties that have put up, people have started coming out to say, I want to be an aspirant, etc. When you look at the two parties, which of its members do you think would have a hard time making a decision on who their flag bearer should be?
I think that from what I'm seeing, from the perspective of the NDC, it is possible, higher percentage, that JDM would be an easy pick. On the side of the MPP, it's becoming quite difficult among delegates, with the choice between the current Vice President, Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, and Alan Chiramatin, because when you check from the MPP tradition, they believe in loyalty, party loyalty, and they believe in first come, first serve. And hitherto, it was not an issue of performance. But you realize that the introduction of Bawumia into the MPP politics, is trying to change that kind of culture where, majority or some people within the ranks of the MPP believe that Bawumia has what it takes, to actually lead. And I realized that, I think about a fortnight ago, when the Vice President was visiting Kumasi to attend the Two Force program, majority of MPs, accompanied him there. And the news from that was an indication that majority of the MPs were in support of him. All right. Now, you see that this is going to create some kind of challenge for the delegates. And so, for me, between the NDC and the MPP, NDC, from the tangent that I see things moving, the progress they are making, I see that JDM is likely to be the.
So for you, it's easier for NDC delegates and executives to make a decision on JDM compared to what MPP delegates have to do because of the cementing. But it's interesting, Dr. Kwapong. It's not clear when the NPP will begin its process to elect its flag bearer, and some of the persons interested in the sport have raised concerns about that. Former Greek Minister Dr. Ifeanyi Akoto says he can't wait any longer, so he launched his campaign. We've seen Alan Chiramatin launch his campaign as well. Mr. Adainimo has also launched his campaign. What is your appreciation of how this is likely to affect the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, if he decides to be the next flag bearer or to contest for that position for the NPP?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to, when it comes to the Vice President, Dr. Bawumia, I think in terms of the timeline where the others have been able to, resign their positions and officially launch their campaigns, he is not in a position to be able to do that. But at the same time, his position as vice president comes with a little bit of an advantage in terms of the timeline, right? That he's still involved in everyday governance, he's still involved in everyday issues, so he still gets the visibility. He still gets people to campaign on his behalf, do things that reminds NPP delegates that we are interested in having him as a flag bearer, although he has not officially said it. I also don't think that he's not interested in throwing his hat in the race. But for now, until the NPP comes out with an official calendar, he would have to rely on those who are interested in his candidacy to keep pushing it for him. But I don't think it places him at any disadvantage because of his official role as vice president. He still gets to do things. He still gets to be involved in everyday governance, and so he still gets the visibility that he would need to be part of this flag bearer race.
You say that his position as vice president gives him an advantage. There are others who think otherwise. They think that based on the current happenings, the current economic situation, people's disappointment in how the governance has been carried out since especially the second tenure started, it potentially could derail his plans to become the flag bearer.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest headaches he faces, not so much though within the party, right? I don't think that within the party that is much of a headache as opposed to in the general election, right? I mean, within the party, he's built, I think between 2016 and now, he's really built strong inroads into the party. And so I think that would really pay off potentially in being able to secure the flag bearership race. I think what would be the challenge is in the general election where he now has to compete against the NDC candidate, and that is where a lot of the economic arguments that he made in 2016 and the way the economy has turned out, some of the challenges that the economy has faced, I think would be brought to the forefront again. And I'm sure he would have to find a way to deal with those challenges, explain why some of the arguments that were made didn't turn out the way we expected it to turn out, things like that. And I think that for me would be the biggest challenge in terms of the economic messaging. I don't think it would be so much a problem for him in the primary as it would be in the general election. Every so often you see people resurrecting a lot of his tweets, a lot of his posts, a lot of his videos. And I think that is where he would have to find a way to respond to all of those things in the general election. I don't think it would hurt him that much in the party's primary.
Do you want to take a bite at this?
So with regards to the Dr. Bayomia's question, with regards to the economic disappointments, kind of perception.
Because that was what was marketed to us, that he was the economic wizard, the one who was going to do that kind of work on behalf of his government. And so people find it very easy to place the burden at his doorstep. I mean,
Yeah, so more especially when people feel that he's the head of the economic management team and that he could have done a lot to salvage, the issue. Now, when you actually understand environmental effects on strategic plans, certain macroeconomic or macro environmental factors that can emerge, especially on the political scene, little effort can be put in, probably to change the ties. All right, the moment it hits you, it will push your efforts aside. And you see, with the kind of economy that we have built for ourselves, as Ghanaians, I can assure you that no political leader, okay, can withstand any external shock when it hits
But Doc,
our
then
economy.
is that not the problem? You are a marketing lecturer.
Yes.
So, with this in mind and with this perspective,
Yeah.
they market
Yeah.
themselves to us as those who can solve the problem.
Yes.
And so once you market this phone to me and say that this phone will do A, B, C, D, E,
Exactly.
without taking into consideration that, okay, well, this one was not manufactured here, so maybe when you bring it within this climate or within this space, you will not get it as this, because you're talking about external shocks and the structure of our economy. But that's not how they marketed themselves
but
to
you
us.
see that the illustration you are giving, products, tangible products even have standards.
Yeah.
So little impact from certain environmental factors like weather and stuff. All right. But when you look at the nature of politics, it is human-centered.
Right.
All right. So it requires human understanding, your knowledge, your efforts. All right. So when those factors begin to have some effects on your economy, and the knowledge and understanding, and more especially the structures, are not well built to take care of those shocks, it becomes a bit problematic.
But if you market this phone to me, sorry, Doc, I just need to understand what you're saying. If you market this phone to me and tell me it can perform at this capacity, and you don't add that, well, maybe in your country you didn't have that kind of fast internet, that kind of reliable internet to give you the efficiency you want. It may perform at this level. And that's why I'm saying that is it not a problem with their marketing and how they market themselves to us?
So it has to do with the promises set when you are campaigning, all right, and the message that comes with it, and the deliveries. So there is a huge gap between promises set and the deliveries. And that is where politicians would need to understand that if you are branding the products and you brand it in such a way that the expectations around it are so high, the little drop in terms of performance would affect the brand, all right? And it will not make the brand appealing. And that is why normally people believe that, voters believe that when you set a promise and you don't deliver, then of course it will bring some kind of perception against you and they feel that you have actually failed. All right. So that is where the issue is. Now, concerning the question that you asked, Dr. Kwapong, you see, the perception around Dr. Baumia and the propaganda that has been raised against him, is something that if the MPP mean to work on it, they can work on it. And I don't really also see it to be so problematic from a marketing perspective or from a political marketing perspective. All right. So it is about the messaging and how he can put his team together to position him above the propaganda. All right. Because his name has actually penetrated. Even school children, knows they are aware of that name. And so getting a message, to propel that brand is what the MPP should be looking out for.
Dr. Kwapong, should delegates who are making a decision on who their party's aspirant be, should they know from the word go who is going to be chosen as a flag bearer? And does that have any impact on the dynamics of any of these candidates whose names that we've mentioned?
Well, I think some, certain candidates would come to the flag bearer race in the minds of the delegates as having greater strengths than others or more advantage than others, right? On the NDC side, for me, it's very obvious. I actually don't see anybody being able to topple the former president. I mean, I just don't see it. I think I know that he is from all the signs, I think he's the presumptive flag bearer for the party. I don't see anybody being able to topple him because of, his standing in the party, having led the party twice before, etc., etc., etc. He's he's well known, all of that. So I think on the NDC side, it would definitely be former president.
What my question is, Doc, is whether these people, John Dramani Mahama, Alan Tremartin, should tell us who they are going to pair with, okay, as possible vice presidents.
Right.
Should the delegates know ahead of time, and will that in any way change the dynamics for any of them?
It potentially could, but I think they also like to follow the process where probably, I'm sure if you ask any of the candidates, who would you select as your vice president, their answer is going to be, well, let me first win the nomination because, I want to make sure.
Shouldn't it be the other way around? I mean, and I want to take your thoughts on that, because we've seen how important the role is, or we know how important that role is. If you're going to be heading the economic management team, don't the delegates deserve to know, okay, I don't like this pairing, so I wouldn't choose, I prefer that pairing, and so I will make a decision on that before they go to elect the flag bearers?
I mean, it will be very helpful, as you said. I mean, it will be especially the critical role of the vice president as the head of the economic management team, right? And if you're going to make the economy a centerpiece of your campaign, then it would be good for the delegates to say, well, if you paired with person A as opposed to person B, does that increase our chances? How then will the voters also perceive us in terms of our ability to manage the economy? Should they give us the mandate? But probably if you ask for that, I'm sure the candidates would say, well, let me win the nomination first and then we can have that conversation.
Doc, are we putting the horse before the cart in this matter?
At all. You see, I think I've stated here. So when you raised that question, I was like, yeah. You see, when we're discussing the NDC some time ago,
the last time you came into the
I think I made this point. And to me, it is a straight yes. All right. Why? Because we've gotten to a point that I don't see a football team, okay, the coach not naming the team ahead of a match. All right. I think it was Otto Addo who decided to hide, his squad from Ghanaians prior to the Nigerian game. All right. But if you check all standards and principles, okay, you see that normally they name their team 8 hours, 6 hours to the match. Now, you see, I've been advocating for this, and this is what I believe, that even apart from naming the running mates, all right, which used to be the norm when we were in secondary schools and at the universities, all right, I think that the potential candidates should be, by now, they should be naming even their ministers.
Interesting.
Yeah, because you don't wait till you hit governance for us to vote for you. You see, in governance, the moment you are voted for and you assume office, it starts, your duties start from there. And you have no excuse for you to come back 4 years to come and tell us that you were not prepared for it, we should give you more time, and that of thing. And that has been the song that politicians have been singing to us. And it is because when they are preparing for the contest, they don't put their team together. So it will take them 6 months in office to name their team, and even sometimes more than that. So how do you expect productivity? You understand? When we expect you to be delivering. So for me, the question that you ask is a straight yes. They should be able to name who their running mates will be. They should start thinking about their ministers, and they should start thinking about key objectives and policy directions.
So it's not just about a campaign message you're throwing around,
no,
but you're doing the real work.
Exactly, because that would inform delegates, okay, of your objectives, the policy direction, and the people that you put in charge for them to execute certain things. So, for instance, if you are talking about entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is going to be a flagship policy, then who is there? And what vision do you have for that person? And what vision does that person also carry to make entrepreneurship a hub of industrialization in this country? Now, if you are able to get that conversation moving and setting this conversation right, of course, productivity will be high, governance will not be that difficult, and every time that you get people elected, we don't have to be disappointed.
Right, interesting. So we'll be wrapping up the conversation shortly, but Doc, this angle of it brings to mind another conversation that has come up, and especially for a lot of millennials and Gen Zs on social media. You hear the conversations about, oh, who our potential first lady will be and how the person looks, and all these things, matter to some voters because for them, image, branding and all that, is that anything we should even be considering in the first place? What the person does, and we've seen over time how, especially first ladies, do certain works. They have foundations, and they seem to be sadly marketing themselves as good support systems. Is that anything that should even come to the table?
Well, politics is sometimes, an interesting sport, but every politician, especially an aspiring president, would have to pull whatever asset they can get to help them win an election. So if that means they have to draw on particular strengths that their spouses bring to the team, they definitely would do that. I mean, I'm sure we all remember the 2016 MPP campaign event where the current second lady, I think she spoke in like maybe 3 or 4 different languages, trying to make the case as to why the MPP should be elected into office, and how a number of people found that to be very endearing. Right. I think all of those things do matter. So the presidential candidates, whatever assets they have in terms of whoever they can bring into their fold to say, if you approach this particular group, you'll be able to make an even much stronger case for me. That's why they would bring in, former presidents. That's why they'll bring in former ministers. That's why they would look for endorsements from different individuals and different groups. So yes, you want ultimately an election to be about the bread and butter issues that faces the ordinary people, but you also cannot rule out the influences of some of these things in our political dynamics.
And then let me just chip this in as we wrap up the conversation. I'm just thinking about what happened on Friday in Parliament and other things that happened within the NDC and the other political parties, and the potential of whoever they select not only to be the president of the country, but also manage or seem to be a respected force within the party when it comes to solving real critical issues. And we've seen John Dramani Mahama do that a couple of times with the party's elections and Cape Coast voting for their youth organizer when there was a bit of a contention between the candidates. We saw him intervene. We saw him also intervene in the matter of the new leadership and all that. Should that matter to the delegates, even though this person is going to be the president of the entire country, should that be a matter of focus as well?
Yes, that should really matter to the delegates, because it's also going to matter to the voters. If you look at what happened in Parliament on Friday and some of the public commentary, I think the last thing that the NDC wants is to be in a position where some of these things chip away at the party's unity. At the same time, what they also want to prevent is the perception in the minds of the public that well, I mean, because I've read comments like, oh, they are not serious, they're already in chaos. Those are not the kinds of perceptions that you want voters to start forming in their minds as you prepare for a major election, which is why I think, regardless of how different sections of the party feel about what happened in Parliament on Friday, it would be in their best interest to quickly close it out, whatever it is. If the former president has to intervene, iron out whatever differences, and quickly move on. For me, it would be in their best interest, because the more it, and some of the, if you look at some of the language that they're using,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
they are being very quote unquote unkind to each other, and nothing would make the MPP more happier than to see cracks, within the NDC as you go into a major election. And my thing is, so you lost this legislative battle over trying to prevent these nominees from being approved. But are you going to get so drawn into it that you lose sight of the much bigger picture, which is your desire to win election 2024 and reset the country on a different economic path as you are, as you're trying to win that election? Yeah, they will just have to move on quickly. I mean, it will be in the best interest of the party if they are able to iron out those differences quickly and really, really, really move on. They can't afford the luxury of having this thing drag any further.
But then how do they change that perception that has been created in the minds of a lot of people that these people are not one? They don't seem to have one voice. Because remember, there was a directive from the party saying that this is the way we are going. How does that affect the image of the party, even in the perspective of the general elections, and how the general voter is thinking? Is this a group of people I can trust? Do they even have a united front? Or, considering the numbers, this may be much ado about nothing?
You see, one, I think parties should stop issuing directives to members of parliament. Yes, parties can state their position on a given issue. But for me, I think it is an affront to representative democracy to say that, therefore, we direct all our parliamentarians to vote in this particular way. Yes, I understand the politics of the legislative process. Sometimes on very critical issues, on policy matters, you want to whip all of your people, in line to take a particular policy position. That I don't necessarily have an issue with. But sometimes some of these directives, I think our parties should start rethinking on what issues they want to give directives to their MPs. And particularly on this issue of nominees, I personally could not believe that the minority leadership sincerely believed they could, get their party into line, because a lot goes into for me, I don't know why they picked that fight over nominees. I would have rather they picked the fight over some major policy issue where you had a much bigger chance of being able to hold all your 136 together, right? But not when it comes to voting for nominees. I mean, people have friendships in parliament. People have been with each other all these years. I found it very difficult that none of these nominees could count on even one NDC MP to vote for them. So again, you're right. That perception that, and again, the other challenge that the NDC faces is, I mean, let's be honest, even if all 275 parliamentarians show up and they all vote strictly along party lines, how many times can the NDC actually win a vote in parliament, right? Because the MPP, save for absenteeism, the MPP would always outnumber them by that one or two votes, which is why, for me, they have to be more strategic in the kinds of fights they want to pick in parliament and the statements they want to make with those fights they pick in parliament.
Right, Dr. Tutubuahin, we've spoken about a couple of issues. The first has to do with if it's really important who is chosen as flag bearer based on the kind of support system they have, i.e. First Lady and all that? Is it even important? And what's the percentage of contribution to the person's fortunes? And then we've also been talking about whoever is chosen and their ability or level of authority they exert in terms of solving party issues and dealing with cracks.
So the First Lady issue first. You realize that, you know, we have gotten to a certain era where it is not just the candidate alone, but all people around him, even including the party leadership matter. All right, because these are individuals around you as a candidate who also pull some votes to support your candidature. All right, and so if you have seen or observed carefully, since you introduced that question, you will see that for some time now, the campaigns of the wives of our presidents and even the vice president have been very, very prominent. And so we saw that in Samira Baumi.
Right.
All right. And you see that they were able to, she was able to bring some votes, you know, to the MPP, especially with the North. All right. And again, with the Islam religion. Now, with regards to the abilities and competence of leaders being able to manage cracks within parties, it is very important. Very, very important, because as a leader, you would need that kind of unifying abilities and competencies. And mostly it depends on the kind of relationship that you build with your cohorts. And if you are not able to do that, then of course you are throwing your campaign into jeopardy. And that is one thing that, you know, it should be done. I think that about 3 days ago, I was in a seminar of African leaders, you know, in Ghana, you know, and one of the key issues that actually came was about that.
This one. Thank you so much. Dr. Tutu Boahen is a lecturer of political marketing, UEW, and he consults on political marketing. And Dr. John Osai Kwapong is a CDD fellow. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. We've been talking about the importance of what delegates should look out for when they're choosing a candidate. Let me take you now.